Hello, YouTube, and welcome to another wondrous YouTuber video. It is I, your host, Cosmos, and today we will be talking about the fifth and final class for the How to Build series for Joust, Season 11. This is How to Build Mages in Joust. So mages, saved them for last because, one, I haven't been playing a ton of them, to be honest. So I wanted to be sure that I was confident in the build paths and whatnot. And also, there are a lot more mages than any other class has gods. So there's a lot more diversity and it's a bit more complex. And, I had to figure out, like, what exactly I wanted to talk about, who I wanted to exclude. There are definitely going to be a few exclusions from this video just because they're not really relevant mages, but we'll be touching on all of the good stuff that if you actually want to do well in the Joust game mode, you'll be happy you watched this video. So we've got a number of builds for you guys. We've got a tablet mage build, a standard mage build, a support mage build, a Mage ADC build, and that's it, actually. We're not going to talk about the Mage Assassins that are Maman, Brigitte, and Ao Kuang, because those guys really are just not really relevant in Joust right now. And we're not going to talk about our good friend Anubis, because he's not really relevant, and his build is kind of like just, a lot of lifesteal. Just an oddball build. You just kind of go like lifesteal, and then you go Rejuvenating Heart. The item that was literally made for Anubis. So, yeah, we're not going to talk about that. If you guys are, like, avid supporters of Ao Kuang, Maman, Brigitte, or Anubis and Joust, then, keep doing you. I'm proud of you. Keep grinding. Your teammates are probably depressed, but if you're having fun and you're doing well with it, who's to say you shouldn't do it? All right, well, the first build we're going to talk about is going to be the Tablet Mage build. This build is going to be used by characters like Agni, Discordia, Morgan Le Fay, Raijin, Yu Huang, and then the top two users of this build, bar none, are going to be Merlin and Tiamat. So if you like Merlin and Tiamat, you probably already know these builds, but we'll be bringing it up here on the screen with Tiamat first. So, of course, as the name suggests, this build is going to revolve around the item Tablet of Destinies. And so the idea behind this build is you're just a poke mage, well, like Merlin and Tiamat, and you're just farming people with your long-range abilities and applying very large damage tablet procs. Late game, you could be looking at anywhere from like 155 damage tablet procs to upwards of, I want to say it goes up to maybe like 170, 180 if you build like damage increase items like Gemma Focus. But yeah, very effective build, comes online much later in the game than your average mage build, which can be a death sentence just because early game is so important and getting control of the game is so important in Joust. Like, you do not want to lose like every neutral buff. Really bad. But if you can find the right spot to plant these tablet mages into your compositions, it can be quite effective and just kind of result in an instant win late game. Like, let's say you're stalemating the first like 15-20 minutes. By the time you hit that 20-minute mark, like a Merlin or a Tiamat with tablet, the other team doesn't have that, and they don't have really solid dive for you, you could just be winning the game for your squad and feeling really good. So this build is very relevant and very strong in the right situations. The starting build is going to be Conduit Gem with T1 Tablet. And then you can play around with how many potions you want. I typically like one health pot and one multi-pot, though you can get one more health pot if you want. Or you can get a mana pot, or mana pots if you really have trouble with your mana. Another option instead of Conduit is you could go Sands of Time and turn that into a Timeline or Pendulum. Late game, most people would go Timeline, but both are an option. The reason I have Conduit Gem up here as the starter I'm just showcasing on screen is because these characters are so late game oriented. It is really nice to have that early game clear, because Tiamat and Merlin level 3 are not exceptional at clearing the wave. But with Conduit Gem, they are much, much better. Even with the recent nerf to Conduit Gem, making it deal a little bit less damage to minions, it still does quite a hefty amount. I think at max charge, Conduit is 40 plus 20 damage to minions, so 60 extra damage to minions. And that's to every single minion. So, absolutely monstrous for clearing the wave early game. But, like I said, up to you whether you feel like you can get away with going Sands of Time. I think typically alternate timeline is going to feel a little bit safer for you. But a Gem of Focus as the upgrade for Conduit Gem is not much different. The only thing is you're just going to have movement speed to avoid your enemies versus an extra life. And prots. So you can utilize them to different degrees depending on which one you go. Alright, so the rest of the build, of course, you're going to rush Tablet. The idea here is you're trying to get those stacks on your Tablet as quickly as possible. And Tablet does give like a nice little punch of health. And then your core items are going to be Tablet, Book of Thoth, Breastplate, and Soul Reaver. You'll see a common thread here is a lot of mana. So the best item to combo with Tablet, of course, is Book, since you get the most mana from this guy out of any item in the game. And then you can go Breastplate as a defensive option. That also gives mana, so that's more damage. Tablet at max stacks will give you 5 extra damage per 100 mana on your Tablet procs. So Breastplate of Valor is essentially a 15 damage increase for your Tablet here. You don't have to go Breastplate if you don't want to. You could go Chronos Pendant instead, but you do want, ideally, a heavy source of cooldown in your build somewhere. And then you're going to want Soul Reaver at some point. Typically, this is the pretty average build path to go if you're going for a Tablet build, though, like in this exact order. So you could go, like, you could switch the order of, like, Breastplate and Book if you wanted to. You could just get, like I said, get the Chronos Pendant instead of Breastplate. It's up to you. You got to feel around with it, see how you're liking it. But this is the typical loadout, and then you just have one item with which you can do whatever the heck you want. Ideally, you can get a heavy percent pet item, so that's usually Obsidian Shard. So then, instead of just having to rely solely on your Tablet damage to deal damage, your actual abilities can hit for a decent amount. I remember I went against a Charon that had Cloak Thieves late game, and just a full tank Charon with Cloak Thieves, Pridwin, Void Domaru, all that jazz. And I went this build with Soul Gem at the end, actually. And so I had no percent pen. My Tablet was hitting him for like 155. I think I went timeline that game. And my Soul Reaver was hitting him for like 50. I ended up selling my Soul Gem for Ob Shard, and then all of a sudden my Soul Reaver's hitting for like 110. So definitely want to heavily consider getting Obsidian Shard as the last item in this build, unless you need to get something else. So Divine Ruin might be a need if they have a ton of healing, but in most cases you want to get the Obsidian Shard. I do have other items listed down here as to little options that you can deviate your build into in different areas. So like I said, I've tried this with Soul Gem. It feels pretty good, but it's obviously way better against squishies if you're going against really heavy, tanky targets. That Obsidian Shard is probably very high value for you. If you went Conduit Gem, you went Gem of Focus, you could go Chronos Pendant at the end of this build, get max CDR, and just be a super, super abuser of your CDR and just play from super far back and just tablet proc people from a million miles away. That's a completely fine strategy. Or like I said earlier, you could replace your Breastplate with Chronos Pendant there. Divine Ruin is usually only built out of necessity if they just have like too much healing, and you would build that towards the end. Other options are E-Staff, can give you a little bit more survivability, little HP and mana if you're against some very heavy tanky targets. Staff of Mirrodin is a nice little option, mainly for gods like Merlin, Agni, Discordia. You wouldn't build it on like Morgan Le Fay or Raijin because they don't get the Mirrodin proc until after their ults are done casting. You could do the Mirrodin on like Yu Huang too. But I'd save that for very particular scenarios. Probably wouldn't build it too often. Gem of ISO is an option. Probably wouldn't be building this up in many games, but if they have a heavy shielding, you could consider getting a Gem of ISO to help your team out. Like they picked like, I don't know, like Geb Nike. Gem of ISO is probably a very nice option for you. And then, of course, you've got alternate timeline here for if you decided you could get away with Sands of Time as your starter. But more often than not, you kind of have to go Conduit Gem, especially if you're playing one of the lower clear tablet mages like Tiamat, just because her early clear is so abysmal if you don't go Conduit Gem. So, yeah, keep that in mind. As for relics, we're pretty much always getting beads and Aegis. You could mess around and get like a blink if you're trying to get real aggressive, but I wouldn't try and reinvent the wheel here. This is a carry character through and through. You're just trying to play a poke game and have really defensive options for if they are able to get to you. So beads and Aegis are the best for that. And then consumable-wise, you want to make sure you're getting your wards, you know, all different types of them, just depending on situations. Watch out for a video on how to choose your wards. Potion of Power is something that you aren't too concerned with until you finish your build, because this build, all your damage is basically coming from your tablet. Not all of it, but most of it. So you don't need to be too concerned about having Potions of Power. You're just worried about getting your items online. And then as for 3k pots, both 3k pots are actually quite relevant in a build like this. 3k Power Pot is going to make your abilities hit harder, but it's not going to make your tablet hit harder. And this is a tablet build, tablet-centric, build. So 3k Power Pot isn't as impactful. Like I keep saying, the whole point of the build is to run around like a little maniac and just hit people with tablets off CD until they die. You're just poking them, and poking them. So a 3k defense pot might actually get you a little bit more value if you find yourself getting dove a bit and they picked like a Wheelix or Kamazazi and a good dive for you. 3k defense pot could help you out. And of course, all of those potions are going to be bought after you finish your entire build, because this build is all around tablet and all around getting all your items done. And that's it. That's the tablet mage build. Moving on, we have the standard mage build. So this is going to be your run-of-the-mill mage, you know, your burst mage. You're building all the normal mage items. And so this is going to be pretty much for every single mage in the game, with the exception of the very niche mages that have very niche applications. And that would be something like Anubis, who's doing more of like a lifesteal build. Freya isn't going to be using this build, or Olorun. Those are like more auto attack mages, not your standard mage. It's just like looking to burst with abilities. And then Ao Kuang and Maman Brigitte are not going to be using this build because they're more assassin mages. So standard mage, though, like I said, abusing the abilities, trying to make the abilities hit as hard as possible. Slight deviation from the tablet build. Tablet build mainly focused around that tablet, right? So Thoth is going to be our problem child for the standard mage build. He's going to have a start of Sands of Time, T1, either Chronos Pendant, Charon's Coin, Doom Orb. And then he's going to have a little bit of a potion action going on. You could, once again, switch out this Sands of Time and go Conduit Gem if you really want to have that extra clear. Maybe you prefer that late game Gem of Focus. But Sands of Time turned into Alternate Timeline or Pendulum, depending on how safe you feel, will be probably a little bit more consistent late game. Especially if you don't really have great abilities to keep the Gem of Focus passive up in the late game. Like Thoth can kind of like throw its 3 around, right? But a character like Zeus is going to have a bit of a harder time keeping up a Gem of Focus passive. Another starter that is a little bit more interesting that you could be building on these standard mages is Vampiric Shroud. Oh, I replaced the wrong slot there. Vampiric Shroud is actually bugged right now. In this specific instance, I'm sure by the time you watch this, maybe if you're watching this a little later, that it's fixed. But Vampiric Shroud actually gives you 30 power. It's only supposed to give 25. And it has a lot of sustain built into it. That part is not bugged. That part is still very good. Even through its nerfs, Vampiric Shroud has maintained that about it. And then Sacrificial Shroud, the upgrade, not bugged. Really strong upgrade that is kind of like Gem of Focus. 15% extra damage on your abilities, but they take your health. Sacrificial Shroud can be very nice for those characters that can't keep up that Gem of Focus later on in the game, like Zeus. Like in Conquest right now, I do believe stuff like Zeus is very important or very impactful because you want to pressure mid. And Vampiric Shroud is bugged to have the most power out of any starter. Has 30 power. Has a very nice upgrade. And you don't need to keep up that Gem of Focus passive late game for a character that's popular like Zeus. So you can get away with that Sac Shroud. So Sacrificial Shroud is an option. Keep it in mind. And then, of course, you're going to load out with a couple of pots as well. You can decide how many you want. You can get an extra health pot, get an extra multi-pot, you can get mana pots. But I personally prefer one health pot, one multi-pot. Find that's just about right for me. You're not trying to get hit very often as a mage, so unless they have like a really heavy poke comp, you could probably get away with 2 potions or even less. You could load out with just like 1 health pot if you were really feeling it. As for first item, you could have finished this lost artifact into Chronos Pendant, Charon's Coin. I think if you went Sands of Time, Charon's Coin feels really good to load out with first item. And if you went Conduit Gem, first item feels really good to load out with Chronos Pendant. Because if you want the Sands of Time, you have a little bit of cooldown already. So you're not feeling too bad about just diving straight into this percent pen. And if you want Conduit Gem, you're feeling like you might want to get a little bit cooldown online. You got really heavy clear already with your Conduit, and you just want to make sure that you have abilities up early and often. 2 very, very core items to the standard mage build here are going to be Obsidian Shard and Soul Reaver. You can kind of mix around where you want to put them in. Typically, you want to get Obsidian Shard before you get Soul Reaver, unless you bought Charon's Coin, which gives you some nice percent pen, so you could put Soul Reaver before Shard if you wanted to. But I typically find that just getting that maximum percent pen is what you're looking for. So in Joust, a lot of the time you're killing a lot of tanks. So the things that you want to kill tanks in order are percent pen, Soul Reaver, cooldown. Because you want to be able to hit them hard, and you want to be able to hit them often. So those are your most important stats if you're going against heavy tank compositions. If you're not against heavy tank compositions, then you can get a lot more away with going to more flat pen based options. Like instead of rushing like Charon's Coin or Chronos Pendant first option or first item, you could even rush like a Spear of Deso or a Divine Ruin if you're against a double backline comp. You could get a Book of Thoth early, or you could go a flat pen item into a Book of Thoth. So a lot of this is going to be very based around what you're against in terms of the order you go and the items you choose. So you need to really figure that out for yourself. I have the core items up here. This is just the most consistent core of items that you can go. Are these just max pen, a lot of cooldown, Reaver. Reaver is how you deal damage to tanks, guys. Percent pen and Reaver. If you get nothing else from this build, get that. Percent pen and Reaver. That's what you need to deal damage to tanks. These other items down here, like I said, are just really good for killing squishy targets. So the flat pen, incredibly good early if you're just looking to burst people from an early stage. Can really help with that early game centric Joust mindset. Book of Thoth is the highest power item you can get in the game as a mage. So it's nice to fit that in, but you don't always have room, specifically if you're against those really heavy tanky targets, like I said. But like, let's say you're just trying to deal as much damage to a squishy as possible. Your build would probably look something like a Spear of Deso Rush. Book of Thoth, second item, is not bad at all. It stacks pretty quickly. And then if you're like a good Mirrodin mage like Thoth, who can get the Mirrodin proc on their actual ultimate ability, you do something like this, and then you're just like exploding squishies with a build like this. And then you're probably against one tank, at least. So you'd probably want to finish off with like a Obsidian Shard, Soul Reaver type of thing. But if you are against a more squishy-based comp and you find yourself hitting the squishies a lot more, getting the items from this third row can be very, very nice. You do want to incorporate Divine Ruin if you're against a lot of healing. Though healing in general is a bit weaker in Smite these days than it used to be. The only gods that heal like a lot are like Hel, Ixchel, and like Guan Yu. The others are a little bit kind of not amazing. So unless you're against like either of those, any of those characters, or you're against like a bunch of characters, or multiple characters that have like decent heals in their kits. Like you're against like Kulu and Horus, like both those guys have decent heals, but I wouldn't worry about just like only having one of them on the team in terms of building the anti-heal. Like you don't really want to build the anti-heal if you don't have to, but if they have enough, like you really should build Divine. And if you're gonna build Divine, that would typically be either the first or second slot after your starter. So you could go like Sands, Charon's Coin, then you'd probably build Divine here. And then up to you how you want to finish it off. If you want to go like Shard Reaver there, or you want to make sure you get your cooldown first. You really just have to feel it out and kind of figure out for yourself the orders you like against particular comps. But these are just kind of all the items you want, and I've kind of given you good scenarios for when you should build them. As for some situational items, kind of put it under the defensive tab here. Soul Gem is a pretty decent item, got buffed recently. Has 80 power now instead of 70. It can give you a lot of nice little sustain. But like I said, it can be a little tough to fit it in the build just because sometimes you just need like these core items as soon as possible. So, but if you can't find a spot to just slip a little Soul Gem in, it can be really nice on characters that are poking a lot. And you're just getting a lot of Soul Gem procs. Gem of Isolation is an item that's actually pretty good right now. These are situational items. Be clear, very situational. You only really build these once you have your core stuff online, or if you like feel like you need them to like survive. So Gem of Iso is going to be nice against characters like Nike, good against characters like Geb, you know, heavy shield characters, and you're just trying to play like a game where you're just trying to keep the enemies as far away from you as possible, which is typically what a mage is doing. But that Gem of Iso is very good at maintaining your distance while also applying some CC for your teammates, and mainly limiting those shields if they have a lot of them. Ethereal Staff does a similar thing, except it gives you more survivability. So if you're against really healthy targets, like they played like Double Guardian and a Hunter, and they're playing like Jing Chen, Cthulhu as their front line, those guys are, you know, touching the skies of 4k HP. So getting an E-Staff somewhere in your build could be very effective. You'd probably be getting it a little bit later on in your build, like as a last item is kind of where you would mainly slot in these defensive options that are more situational. And then we've got Mantle of Discord for if you really just can't stop their dive and you need to get a defensive item. It's kind of like a last resort item, but very, very useful for a squishy character that's just trying to like get that brief moment of CC immunity and then just thought dash out. You know, it could really save your life. It's kind of like a alternate timeline in that sense. And those are pretty much all the items that you really need to know for the standard mage build. It's pretty simple. And you just need to feel out your games and figure out which of these are the best and when you want them. But like I said, killing tanks, these are the 4 items you want. Killing squishies, these are the items you want. Surviving, these are good items to pick from. Relic-wise, you are a squishy mage in the backline. You are getting Beads and Aegis. It's just the classic carry thing to do. You could purchase Shell instead of Aegis in some scenarios, like let's say you're against Odin and your Thoth, or any other character that can't really escape this cage really easily. Shell can be really useful for you. Sometimes Aegis is still better though. It really depends on your team comp. Sometimes you can get away with like a Bracer and just play like max range and just pelt people from far away. But more often than not, you're just going Beads and Aegis. Let's be honest, it's the safest thing to do. But you can get creative with some of these other ones, like Med, Sprint, Shell, mainly. And Bracer. Or Blink. Blink can be okay too if you're trying to get real aggressive, like if you're playing Chang'e. With a build like this, Chang'e is definitely looking to play more of an assassin-style mage, but building like normal mage items. So like Chang'e would be building probably more from this row, because she's trying to go after the squishy guys. Consumables. Pretty much always, you know, getting your wards online. Just because you're not a tank doesn't mean you shouldn't be buying wards, guys. 500 pots, very useful For builds like this, you can get these, like a couple items into your build if you want. These Potion of Powers give you quite heavy extra pressure, especially if you have a lead or if you need to defend really bad. Like maybe they have a lead and they have Bull Demon King and they're pushing your T1 tower and you like, I just need a little bit more damage, but I can't get the gold fast enough. A Potion of Power can be very nice to aid in your defense, even early on in your build. And then 3k Power Potion, of course, is going to be really, really nice. But if you don't feel like you can live and get your 3k Power Potion, 3k Defense Pod is always there for you. As a squishy character, you make pretty good use of this gosh darn thing when people are diving you. As opposed to if you're building a tank and you build like 50 power, you're getting nothing out of this one. But you're getting a lot more out of that one. And that's why 3k Power Potions are favored to the squishy characters. Because these gosh darn fools get so much value out of the defense pot. When I'm a tank, I get no value from the other one. And I hate it. But that's been my TED Talk rant of being a tank player. We're moving on. That is it for our standard mages. We are now talking about... wow, we were just talking about tanks. We're about to talk about the support mage build. Fantastic. So support mage build is going to be, of course, for your mages that are going to be building more tanky. This is a little bit of a different style from pretty much all the other mage builds that we're going to be talking about, because instead of focusing on dealing a lot of damage, you're focusing on keeping yourself and your teammates alive, which I guess is a facet of being a mage, but you're going to be a little bit more tanky in doing so. Characters that utilize builds like this, or this build rather, are going to be Baron Samedi, Set, Aphrodite, Hel, and Nox. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. We got Baron Samedi as our example character here. So, starter item, you're going to go Sands of Time, a tier 1 Gauntlet of Thebes, and then you're going to load out with a couple health pots and a couple multi-pots. If you're Baron Samedi, you can load out with a Baron's Brew. Didn't put it on here just because this is supposed to be an all-encompassing, all characters of this build type. And normally you'd be getting health pots and multi-pots, but like I said, if you're Baron Samedi, just get your chalice. And just get your chalice and no other potions, and you're good. So the idea here is you're going to go Sands of Time straight into Gauntlet of Thebes, and then you're just going to build whatever the heck you want that helps your team out the most. The whole playstyle here for a support mage is, although you're building tanky, you need to remember you're not a tank. You can take some hits, but you don't want to take them if you don't have to. So the entirety of this build is going to revolve around being as mobile as possible, having cooldowns up as often as possible, and just giving your team buffs. That will make it so you can win fights. And you'll notice that the characters that we selected to build this type of way are characters that have a lot of CC. Baron Samedi wrapping people up, sucking them in. A lot of healing, power reduction, attack speed reduction. We got E-set, silence, stun, big damage mitigation, 30% mitts. We got, Nox, a whole ton of CC on that. So, that's the idea. You could swap this starter for Warrior's Axe if you want, but I'd pretty much almost always go Sands of Time. Alternate timeline is just the best. Unfortunately, we can't build support starters in Joust, so we can't be going Low Nose or War Flag or anything like that. So we have to choose from either Sands or Warrior's Axe, and I am a big fan of Sands of Time because we're not going to be building a whole ton of prots. So the Sunring Axe will lose a bit of value. You could go Conduit Gem if you want. Gem of Focus is pretty solid on these ability spamming supporty backliners, because they'll just get a lot of use out of the movement speed. And like I said, we're trying to abuse our distance and apply a lot of CC. So Conduit Gem is an option. And I would very much consider it if you have a low clear composition. Let's say you go like Baron Samedi and you go Ho Yi. Pretty solid combo, Baron Samedi and Ho Yi. Because the Ho Yi with Baron, just really easy setup, can find a lot of nice bounces. And just apply a whole ton of focus onto one target and make them really killable. And then let's say like a third piece for that comp, Bracken. pretty insane with Hou Yi because he just says there's no way out, and then all of a sudden there's a Ricochet triple bouncing you. So you put that with a Baron, and you've got a pretty solid comp. The only thing you can't do is clear a wave. So you might want to get a Conduit Gem on your Baron Somni so that you can clear waves. And then you'd be looking like you're in a pretty good spot there. So definitely something to consider. But like I said, more often than not, you are going the Sands of Time. And then straight into Gauntlet of Thebes, like I said. And then the most common items that you're going to be building after that point will be Chronos Pendant. Because, like I said, we're trying to abuse that cooldown weaving in and out of fights. Chronos Pendant is pretty much the best item you can get, aside from the Gauntlet of Thebes, on a support mage, because it'll allow you to play that weaving style very easily with the cooldown resets there from the Chronos Pendant. And Chronos Pendant usually a bit tougher to, or less reliable to grab, especially early on as a standard mage, because it's got a little bit lower power and it's just kind of all cooldown focused. So you do have to worry about if just having too much cooldown and not dealing any damage. On these characters, we don't care about how much damage we're dealing. We're just trying to get the abilities off and lock people in place for our teammates to follow up on. So Chronos Pendant, perfect item. Spirit Robe and or Mantle of Discord, also an incredibly strong item to build on a character like this. And then we've got Eldritch Dagger, also incredibly strong to build on characters like this, because since we're abusing a mobility, ability spam gameplay style, we're looking to build certain items that will be good with Relic Dagger, like Bracer of Radiance. So Bracer of Radiance and Relic Dagger, pretty criminally strong combination. So Eldritch Dagger has earned its spot among the core items here because of that. But you do have to watch out. You probably don't want to build all of these items together just because you'll be a little bit overcapped. You could solve that easily by either going like Conduit Gem and not having to worry about that, or you could just not build Eldritch Dagger and Bracer. So it depends. It depends. We'll get to that when we get there. As far as damage items go, Divine Ruin is a solid item to pick up. Mainly getting it for the anti-heal, of course. And to be picking that up probably somewhere after this point in the build. This is pretty standard for me, as I just go like starter item, Thebes, Chronos Pendant, and then I just kind of pick and choose what I want. So Divine Ruin would be a nice one to pick up if you really need anti-heal. You could pick up an Ethereal Staff if they have very healthy targets. It also does give some CCR there. So if they're really healthy targets and you don't feel like you need more protections, you could go E-Staff instead of Spirit Robe here. Gem of Iso is a nice one to throw on towards the latter stages of your build for that shield reduction, and then the slows just make you that much more annoying. And then we've got Last Gasp, which is pretty nice for the support mages outside of Nox, since she doesn't have a heal. Like if you really just want to deal more damage, you could build Last Gasp. It gives a nice chunk of health, mana, flat pen, good amount of power, and it does give extra power. So if you're just looking to chunk people, like you find yourself getting a nice lead and people aren't able to get on you and kill you and focus you out, you could feel comfortable slapping a Last Gasp in there somewhere. But that's it for the damage situational items. If you are looking to be more defensive, which in most cases you are, you're looking towards something like Stone of Binding. Since you've got a ton of CSD, you can make a really good use out of Stone of Binding on a support mage, while also helping your teammates deal more damage. If for whatever reason you decided you didn't want to get like Spirit Robe or Mantle, or if you wanted to skip Chronos Pendant, you could get Pridwin to be as tanky as possible. Or you could get Chronos Pendant and Pridwin together if you want it to be just really heavy cooldown. I typically just love getting a Spirit Robe or a Mantle somewhere in the build though, just because I find those items so good for survivability. But that Pridwin shield is also very good, so you guys just need to mess around with it, figure out what you like more. Talisman of Energy, really solid to get on a character or a support mage, because we are, like I keep saying, playing a style of kind of weaving in and out of a fight and just tossing a lot of abilities and providing a lot of control for the team. Talisman of Energy is a perfect item to do that kind of thing, similar to how building Relic Dagger with Bracer is what we're trying to do. So like if you're just trying to abuse mobility entirely, and you build like this build that is built down here, that's kind of perfect. You're playing against like a mage, guardian, and a warrior comp. This might be what you're looking at. Just a full mobility abuse. And then I ran out of things that I wanted to put on the defensive tab, so I threw on a cloak. This would typically replace your Gauntlet of Thebes. And it would make a lot of sense if you're going Conduit Gem 2, because it gives you the cooldown where you otherwise would not have it from your Sands of Time. The cloak is an option. You could build it with Thebes too if you really wanted to. I wouldn't recommend it though, because these guys, these support mages, they take a while to get tanky. So I typically try to avoid items that really need to ramp up, like Cloak. Thebes needs to ramp up, but it only takes like 3 to 5 minutes to do that. Cloak takes, 15 to 20 minutes to do that. So I'd be pretty careful with slotting in Prophetic Cloak in your build, but it is an option. And that's going to do it for items. Moving on now to... Oh! I almost forgot one. I'm going to replace the cloak with it. Sphinx's Baubles. He got nerfed pretty heavily by, I think it was, what, a 250 gold increase? It was either 250 or 350. But it is still valid. The stats are the same, it just costs a whole lot more. And if there are any characters that are going to build Sphinx's Baubles, it would be a support mage, because they abuse it the hardest. Because, as we keep saying, we're abusing a cooldown based build that's going to be like weaving in and out of fights from long distance and just applying CC. So if you were to get that max CDR through, say, a build like this, you could slap a Sphinx's Baubles on here and then it'd just be even more annoying. Which is perfect. Alright, anyway, moving on. Relic choice. The main relics you'd be building on support mages. And once again, keep in mind we're focusing on weaving in and out of fights, playing our distance, having cooldowns up as often as possible. Meditation. Perfect. The healing, we don't care. We love the healing, it's cool, whatever. But the 1.5 second CD resets are what we're looking for from the med. So you want to get this med upgraded sooner rather than later, if you can. Bracer. We're trying to play our distance using this item. Maximum upgrade Bracer is leagues above what any other form of Bracer can do for you, so you are looking to upgrade this as soon as you possibly can. And perfect for the gameplay style. Usually I do try and see if I can just have these 2 relics and then get an Eldritch Dagger. Sprint can be very impactful for your support mages, especially your support mages that don't have CC or slow immunities, rather, like Aphrodite and Iset. Baron can get away a lot of the time without getting the sprint, just because he's got the slow immunity from his 2 that applies to his whole team. So Baron basically has built-in sprint, right? As long as you hit the 2. So a little less prominent on Baron than the other support mages, but very, very good against those slows, which can be very annoying. And then Sundering Spear is another one. Since we're playing our distance, we can throw a Baron 3, throw an Eset 3, throw more CC on top of that, and slap him with a Sunder, and really make tanks easy to kill. So Sunder can be very important for your support mages. Other ones that I just didn't have enough room for on here that can be useful. Shell. If you're a support mage, Odin is your worst nightmare. If you somehow let him through and you picked a support mage for whatever reason, you're probably going to want to get Phantom Shell. You're against Gabrakan, probably want to get Phantom Shell. We typically aren't really going the other relics. You could go beads if they are really just focusing you out. Like you picked Eset and they picked Baron Somdi and Ares in response. And they can just CC really easily. You could grab a beads. But we're never going teleport. Never really going thorns. Horrific would be nice to get, but since we're playing from max distance, it's kind of hard to apply Horrific. We don't really want to get blink because we're playing from max distance. And Divine Barrier we would probably build if it didn't suck. So, yeah. That's the state of the relics there. Consumables, you got to get your wards. All different types. Every single ward is useful. Chalice of the Oracle, a little less useful since usually you're getting a Chalice of Healing or a Baron's Brew, though. And you want to make sure you have slots for other types of wards. And then 500 pot can be very useful at any point in your build. Just whenever you need a nice little quick pick-me-up, nice little spike, you could build it anywhere. I'd recommend it as early as this point in your build. You finish your 2 items, and then you could get a power pot if you're really feeling zesty, like you want to apply a lot of pressure, or you need to defend when they have the Bull Demon King, and you just like gotta defend your Phoenix type of thing. Can be nice to have that little 500 pot spike. Since you are a mage, you do make a lot of use out of that power, more so than other classes like Guardians in particular. Don't really have a lot of power scaling to make use of that power, but since I'm building a little bit more tanky, it can be nice to just slot in a potion of power and just feel like I'm a normal mage, but I have a Gauntlet of Thebes. And then Elixir Defense is going to be what you're typically going to be picking up here as support mages. Pretty much going to be entirely avoiding the 3k power pot, because you just don't get a lot out of it. People who are building tanky just don't get a lot out of building the 3k power pot. As opposed to if you're building a lot of power, you get a lot of traction from either the 3k power pot or the 3k defense pot. And that's going to do it for our support mages. We only have one more mage style to talk about, and that is the magical ADC. So we're playing like a hunter, but we have magical abilities and magical damage. It's going to be your characters like Freya, Olorun, Sol, and Kronos. These guys have kind of fallen out of favor in recent times in the Joust scene, but they're still playable. And Freya is going to be our character for this. These Mage ADCs, a little bit tough to put together an all-encompassing build for them, to be honest with you, because they are all very niche in the way they want to build, but they all play in a similar way. So we'll try and talk about the differences between the little niches while sticking to one page in terms of the items in the build. So for Freya in particular, you want to go Conduit Gem, but for Olorun and Sol, you'd want to go Gilded Arrow just because they get so much more out of the basic attack damage, because Olorun can crit. Sol has a passive that makes her basic attacks deal % extra damage. So having extra basic attack damage goes a lot longer way with her. And Freya, most of her damage comes from her abilities. Because when you use your 2-in-1 and you hit somebody, you get your basic attack damage and an ability damage number as well. So she's a little different from Olorun and Sol in terms of how her damage comes out. So the Gilded Arrow is a lot less noticeable and impactful for Freya. Also, Freya's clear is a lot worse. So on Freya, you want to get Conduit Gem. And if you're playing Kronos, well, I'd rather just play Kronos as a mage. But if you had to play Kronos, you could go Conduit or Gilded or Vamp Shroud. You could go a lot of different ones on him. You could go Vamp Shroud, Sands of Time. Get really creative with him. I'd probably lean into more of a power starter on Kronos, though, because he can deal a lot of damage with his abilities. So it'd probably be either Conduit, just so you can clear really easily with your 3, or like Sands of Time, or you could even go like Warrior's Axe if you're really feeling it. So yeah, that does it for starters. But on pretty much all of these Mage ADCs, if you are committing to an auto attack build, you do want to start with a T1 ring. And then pretty much all of them don't really have that many mana issues. Also, you're picking up a mana buff, so you can get away with going triple health pot and 1 multi-pot. Or less, if you feel like you can get away with it and you can just save your money for finishing your items. Because these characters are incredibly item reliant. Specifically Freya, who will be rushing the Hastened Ring item. She's kind of the only character in the game that actually uses Hastened Ring to its maximum effect. Like, you literally just transform into a different character as Freya when you get this item. And so we'll be building it first. You could build it second if you wanted to, and get Demonic Grip first, just so you can have a little bit more cheaper, consistent pressure, just a little bit less kill potential on your own. But if you look at the stats here. Demonic Grip actually gives significantly more power, maximum of 30% pen with 30% attack speed, for 300 less gold. So way more efficient of an item than Hasten Ring. So it really is up to you whether you want to just like play a super farm game and farm as efficiently as possible with Demonic Grip first, or whether you want to make sure that you have kill potential from an early stage with Hasten Ring. If you're playing Olarun or any of the other Mage ADCs, Olarun, Soul, or Chronos, and you are committing to this auto attack build, you would probably not go Hasten Ring just because they don't get as much value as Freya does from it. And you'd instead probably go for a deviated version of Telkine's Ring here. Telkine's Ring is quite a bit weaker since it got nerfed. The damage that it deals got heavily impacted a number of patches ago. So that's kind of why magical ADCs fell apart in general. But if you are going to play magical ADC, you probably should build Telkine's Ring, unless you're Freya. As far as for finishing up the build after you get your rings online, you want to be looking for percent pen and lifesteal from Typhon's Fang. Pretty much every magical ADC is doing that. And then to round out your build, it's a little up to you. You can get a really heavy power spike from Book of Thoth, another heavy power spike from Rod, but the main thing is you're trying to get like as much power as possible, because you're just auto attacking a lot. And so the more power you get and the harder you can get those autos to hit, the better. So Rod is really great for that. Book's really great for that. Nimble Bancroft can be really good because it gives you a lot of power and a lot of attack speed, which are both stats you're looking for. On specifically characters like Olarun that are trying to burst off their ults, characters like Soul that are trying to burst off their ults. Staff of Mirrodin becomes pretty valuable as an option. You could get Spear of the Magus if you're playing something like Freya or Soul. Soul can use it. This item has fallen a bit to the wayside, but it is still there. You're probably building it less often than the others. Definitely requires more testing. But as far as maximum burst potential goes, Spear of the Magus is a pretty solid option to go, as well as it gives you a bit of lifesteal to play alongside your Typhon's Fang, right? Typhon's Fang gives you 1.5x increase to your power based on your lifesteal, so that's pretty nice. And then defensive options, if you really just are trying to live, stuff like Mantle of Discord as a singular defensive option can be nice. Magi's Blessing kind of does a similar thing as well, depending on what you're against. And Gem of ISO. I put that on here, and I'm kind of regretting it now that I'm looking at it, but it is there. It is something you can build, particularly on something like Freya, and just make it baby mode in terms of dealing your damage with your 2-1 there. Just because you can't miss. Between the Hasten proc and the Gem of ISO, there is just impossible challenge levels of missing percentage going on there. Relics, you pretty much always go Beads Aegis on these guys. And then the consumables are about the same as most of the other mage builds we talked about, where it's just, you're getting your wards, you're getting your 500 pots when the spike feels good. And then you can go either a 3k power pot or defensive pot, depending on how you're feeling in the game. Like, if you just, find yourself in situations where you just cannot live, 3k defense pot is what you're looking for. But if you're just like, I can't kill this stupid tank, but he's never able to hit me, 3k power pot could be what you want. 3k power pot is pretty OP in terms of how much extra damage it gives you. So, that's going to do it for our magical ADCs, guys. And that's going to do it for our How to Build Mages in Joust Season 11. Fantastic. We are going to skip over builds on Anubis, Ao Kuang, and Maman Brigitte. Because I'm going to be honest with you guys. Those gods are terrible in Joust. And we do not care about them. Subject to change. But as far as it goes today, we will not be mentioning those guys or any builds that go along with them. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Got a lot out of that tablet build, standard mage build, support mage build, and Mage ADC build. Found a few new items to incorporate into your build, / found some new inspiration for what to play, who to play, how to build it. Don't forget to leave a like on the video if you did enjoy, of course, and subscribe to the channel for more. And I'll catch you in the next one.